And welcome to our March Cal Sega Coffee Chat. Today we will be addressing a really exciting topic for supervisors under pressure, tools for the real world. Our coffee chat program is just one of the many ways that CalSaga provides benefits to our members. As you heard, we produce these bi-monthly member-only events on a variety of topics at no cost to all of you, our CalSega members. And this program is brought to you by the Ambassador Committee, which is made up of volunteers like myself, our wonderful speaker today, a number of our board members, but also members who are just interested in plugging in. One of my favorite elements about these events is the opportunity to connect with members like all of you and dialogue about what's happening day in and day out in our industry. I do hope you will all join us immediately following the interview today to just spend some time strategizing with one another, talking with one another, sharing. It can be about what we talk about with Tony, but it can also be about whatever else feels relevant in your business and in your day-to-day operations. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce our speaker today, Tony Benavides, who just has a plethora of knowledge and experience in both training and supporting boots on the ground leaders, just like many of you. Tony is the director for Guardian Security Agency. He is a retired law enforcement officer after 23 years, with 13 of those years being spent as a first line supervisor. Tony works with new supervisors to hone their leadership skills, develop their people skills, and level up to management. He has earned a bachelor's in philosophy and has an MBA. He's also a graduate of the Sherman Block Supervisory Leadership Institute. He is a certified instructor of tactical brain training, which, if y'all haven't heard, is some really cool stuff. It's a specialized mindfulness-based program designed by Gina Rollo White for first responders and high-stress professionals, designed specifically to help them manage the trauma and chronic stress that we all experience. Tony is also a certified mindfulness and meditation instructor. So, Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to kick off this discussion. And before we dive in, I promise I will let Tony talk in just a second. But I want to share with all of you that you all are the reason that we brought this topic to Coffee Chat. Specifically, when we did the breakout sessions at our conference for the first time a couple years ago, the way that we set it up was it was a connection time. So people were attending the event and then they had the opportunity to kind of sit at different tables that had different topics. And we observed that Tony's table on operational supervision was very popular. And every single session, everyone stayed after. And in fact, in the very last session, they were still there 30 minutes after we had closed everything down. And so, what we learned from that is that you all have a lot to say about this topic. You have thoughts, you have questions, you have ways that you want to grow and things you want to do to engage yourself as a operational leader, but also the teams that you lead. And I just was so inspired. And Tony is just a wonderful wealth of knowledge. We've had him on a previous coffee chat where we talked about mental health in our industry, and he was able to bring some of his experience and his training that comes from the tactical brain training and thinking about, how do we mind from a mindfulness position, how do we approach the chronic stress that we all deal with when we operate 24/7, 365? There's a lot that comes with that. So I guess I'll kick us off, Tony, with our first question today, which is from your experience mentoring supervisors, what is the most common pressure point that operational security leaders tend to struggle with? And then, as a follow-up to that, why does it tend to catch them off guard?
Well, thanks for the nice introduction. And you're right. Let me just get back to the conference. You're right. Those tables were packed and everybody did stay, which is to me a sign that everybody is sort of struggling with the same issues out there, which is how do we develop supervisors? How do we supervise our first line, our frontline people out there? And then, owners and managers, how do we support that process? I really, if any of you were at that table, what you saw there was just people who were having discussions about all of the common issues that they have. It really tells me or reinforces to me rather what I kind of have sort of known but haven't really been able to put into words, which is that supervision is a big issue. With all the struggles, all the challenges, the regulatory challenges, the business challenges, everything else that owners have, um, you know, ha- being able to take that supervisor, that direct supervision of the first line people off of your plate really frees the management up to do a lot of other things that need to get done with the business. That's the real benefit of working with your supervisors. And I just want to I won't ask Heather any questions yet, but she is on the call, and she is one of the owners of Guardian Security Agency. I think we have had many conversations, and she has talked about how beneficial it's been when you have a good supervisor. But let's be honest. Sometimes you get a supervisor that needs some work, and so sometimes that's a struggle too. But there are a lot of dividends that it pays. To your question, by far, first and foremost, the thing that I see is what supervisors would call confrontation. That is the biggest thing that they see, is how do I have these quote confrontations with people, whether it's you need to tuck your shirt in, or here's your write up, or you can't be late, or you missed your check in, or whatever it might be. And I think that one of the things that they struggle with is the idea that it doesn't really have to be a confrontation. It's a conversation and it's a collaboration, because we really do we want our employees to be successful. And so if we can shift the mindset from I have to go have this confrontation with this person because I have to give them a write up or whatever the case may be, then it's into a conversation and collaboration. It makes it a lot easier. And also, on that subject, um, if we are just going out to criticize people or to make corrections of people, then of course, every time we show up as supervisors, they're going to say, okay, what did I do now? I mean, I had that experience with the boss before, where every time that boss called me into the office, I knew it was because I had done something that he didn't like. And sometimes it was righteous and I really did do it. And sometimes I didn't. But every time I walked into that door, it was stressful to me. And I've worked with other supervisors who oftentimes brought me in just to tell me that they got a good comment about me, or to give me a commendation, or to just say hello. So if we can think of these visits, A, not always as confrontations, and B, mix these things up. So sometimes they're commendations and sometimes they're corrections. It makes it a lot easier for the employee, and they can be happier to see you. I
Yeah.
don't want to say happy, but happier to see you when you show up.
I love that, and that was just such a great, introductory question. I was so excited to dive into it. I want to back up for a moment and point our audience to the poll that we just launched, because I'm really curious to see your answers. So if you all could just take a moment, I am gonna ask Tony the next question, and then we'll circle back to the poll in a couple minutes. But some of the questions that we're curious about is what category do you fit in? And I'm super curious how many of you are in operational management. Now, this is not one of the questions, but if you feel so inclined to drop it in the chat, I'm also really curious how many of you started as a security professional in the field and kind of worked your way up into management. And so if you're comfortable sharing that, I would love to kind of see those responses in the chat. And then there's a few more questions that we'll talk about from the poll in a few moments. But on to our next question for you, Tony. I think that was a wonderful introduction and just kind of laying some foundation for everyone about where this conversation is headed. Um, I would love to hear, and I'm diving right in, y'all. So I hope you're excited. But when those folks that did start as a security professional and have worked their way up from officer to leader, a lot of times what I have seen and certainly, experienced and done within my own teams is that we've promoted supervisors for being great security officers. They're great professionals, but not necessarily trained leaders. What is the mindset shift that has to happen for those folks to succeed under pressure? Like, if you had to narrow it down to like one or two things, what is that like kind of light switch that has to come on if somebody is going to come from like boots on the ground into leadership in this industry?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is just really simple. You're different now. And I've heard a variation of that. Some people will say you're in a different role now. But what I will say is you are fundamentally different now, not just in a different role, but you are different. And so the mindset shift has to be that look, I occupy a different role now. You may have watched me make mistakes and the same mistakes that I now have to make corrections of you for, but that doesn't mean that correction that I have to make is any less valid. um One of the things, and I always usually I kind of go back to managing my kids in a lot of this too, because some of the instructions have to just be really basic, which is every individual's actions has to be judged on their own action, not next to somebody else's action. And I've had that experience before where I've said, but you were just. Yes, but your action doesn't your my bad action doesn't excuse your bad action. I don't like to say bad action, but can't think of another word for it right now. But it has to be judged individually. And so we have to make that mindset shift. So you are different and you're in a different role. One thing I love, and Heather can attest to this, is Dave Travers, the owner of Guardian. He has a phrase. He says, "Friendly but not friends," and that's the distinction that you have to start to make. You can be friendly, but while we're at work, we're not friends. We can be friends outside, um, but maybe we can't be friends outside if you can't accept that we're going to just be friendly here and we're not going to be friends. Because I would do some things for my friends that I'm not going to do for a person that I'm supervising and that I hold some liability for. So to just to go back to that first question, it's got to be, you are different now. You were a security guard yesterday. Today you're not. Now you're different. So you have to act that way.
I love that. And that quote, I actually wrote that down, and I know Kate just dropped it in the chat as well, but
Yeah.
friendly but not friends, right? And there is a fine line there. And I know it's hard. We spend more hours with the folks we work with, oftentimes than our family, or certainly more time than most of us spend with our friends. And so it's a fine line to walk, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. But I know you've been talking, Tony, so you haven't been able to, review the chat. But I will just share with you that at least a dozen people responded that are on the call today that started off boots on the ground security operations folks, excuse me, security officers and or boots on the ground in law enforcement, which I just think is really fascinating and amazing. Like, just give yourselves a round of applause. That is a really cool um that is a really cool trajectory, and I think there's so much positive that comes from having that boots on the ground experience before you step into leadership. So I'm going to go ahead and ask our wonderful Cal Sega staff, Allie, to go ahead and close that poll, and then we're going to just take a look at some of those results before we dive into the next question. So thank you all for participating, by the way. We have a pretty good split, Tony, in terms of who's on today. So we do have about 24% of the folks that said that they're owner operators, about 34% HR management, kind of in that HR administrative realm. And then about 26% of folks are in operational management. And then a few more said other, and they're dropping some unique roles in the chat, which is amazing. So that's kind of who you're talking to, Tony.
Got it.
Um, in terms of our questions that we asked them, the first one was, what inspired you to sign on today to today's coffee chat? And 53% said leadership development and peer insight. Second place was at 24% of folks said learning about industry trends and emerging risks. And then a few other folks just said it was some CalSega outreach or networking opportunities. Um, the third question that we asked, and I feel this ties into the next couple questions we're going to talk about. So this one, I really wrote this question for you, Tony. What's been the most rewarding part of your role within your organization this year? And 39% of folks, it was tied, 39% said improving operations or efficiency, and 39% said developing and mentoring team members, which I just think is phenomenal. Like that, and there's a few other people that had some unique ones. And of course, a couple people said, winning new contracts. Of course, that's always rewarding and exciting for us. Or strengthening those client relationships, implementing new systems. Those were some of the other options. So, with that in mind, I'm gonna pivot here, and I want to talk a little bit about, um, you know, when it comes to mentorship, when a supervisor is dealing with a difficult officer, or maybe even an upset client, and then they've got somebody just called out for a shift, and it's happening kind of all at once. How do we start to navigate that? When we talk about mentorship being kind of one of the top priorities for folks listening today, and we've got all these things happening as we do day in and day out, kind of where do you begin in those kinds of scenarios?
Well, it begins way before that scenario begins.
Yeah.
Can I just answer because I didn't get to take the poll? And
Yes.
this is directly related. And Heather knows I'm not a butt kisser, so I'm going to say this for her, but it's not just because she's on the call. My thing from the last year, actually the last 2 years, has been, and it ebbs and flows, but watching Heather's stress level decline as she can see that things are getting taken care of by her supervisors and the people that are just below her. So we're talking about supervisors and how to develop them, and one of the benefits of that to the owners, and how to please speak up if you feel so inclined, is that you can kind of go to bed at night and know that things are taken care of. Also, I know the calls don't stop because you're business owners and they just keep coming, but maybe they lessen a little bit, or maybe you don't get the petty ones anymore. But because your supervisor can handle those things. Or you do get a petty one, but you're able to push it off until the next day, because you know that it's just been tamped down a little bit by a good supervisor or a good manager that's beneath you. So I don't know if Heather wants to comment at all on how um, working with the supervisors has affected her in that way. You can jump in now or jump in whenever, but um,
I Hi, I'm Heather. Yeah, it's definitely helped having a strong supervisor team. We've been building them with Tony's help, and it has taken a whole lot of stress off of my plate, and allowed me to build the business more and to focus on other things and have the time to be appreciative of my team and to take the time to thank them because I'm not having to worry about all the other little things. I've got great operational people, and they're helping oversee the supervisors, and there's a really good level now, and I feel like it's just helping the company as a whole all the way around.
And I love thank you for jumping in there, Heather, and being able to share that insight. And just to recap for anybody who maybe missed it, when we sort of explained who Heather is currently the Executive Vice President, Operations Manager for Guardian Security Agency. She's at the helm of Guardian, and Tony's role is the Director of Training there. And one of the things that he spends most of his time day in and day out doing is developing the leaders within Guardian Security Agency. And so it's really awesome to hear Heather's kind of perspective as we're navigating through these questions. And Tony, I thought that was perfect. I think the way you tied in what's been most rewarding for you into again, this is a really pointed sort of question that I love your response, which is it starts long before that moment, right? And so the moment
it
that I
does.
described is like you're dealing with all of these things, all of these fires where you need to be reactive. And how do we discern what move to make first? And then how do we navigate those waters? And I think, the short answer is, well, you actually made that decision 3, 6, 12 months ago, right?
Right, right.
And so
And
I
I
really
will
love that.
I will say that what where we're trying to get to is a point, and where I'm trying to get to personally too, by the way, not just in business, but just in my life, is a point where we are responding and we're not reacting anymore, because reaction is a knee jerk thing and we don't always think it through. But when we can make it a response instead of a reaction, then it's a lot more thoughtful and it's a lot more insightful. And again, you have this complaint from, let's say, a client, and it doesn't need to get to you at 8 o'clock at night, because it's not that serious. But a supervisor has already gotten there, triaged it, and then passed the message through email to the ownership that says this person needs a call in the morning. And at least that client feels good going to bed that night, going, okay, I'm going to get a call from somebody in the morning. That supervisor couldn't address this concern, and the offices are closed, but I know I'm going to hear from somebody in the morning because somebody has triaged that. Whereas before, without good first line supervision and that second level, we're lucky enough to be, I mean, the Travers have built a nice sized business, so we're lucky enough to have some levels. um Before, it would have just gone straight to them, right?
Yeah.
But it does start way before. And a lot of it, the preparation is some of it is about knowing your post orders and knowing the procedures and knowing the law. That's a lot of it. um but another big part of it is prepping the person and working with how they respond to things, because they might show up to a site to talk to somebody, that's fine 364 days of the year, but today was a bad day. And you show up and say, "Hey, can you tuck your shirt in?" And they just flash. Um, something happened that day. Their dishwasher broke, their car broke down, they got two flat tires, whatever the case may be. You didn't know that when you showed up, but now it's here, and so now you have to deal with it. And so just prepping yourself, psychologically and emotionally, to be able to say, okay, this isn't personal. Um, Something's going on with this person, and not and then respond to that, with the appropriate tool. That preparation begins long before, we get to that problem.
Absolutely. No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I think, um, the something that it kind of goes in line with that, uh, process, right? As we develop our toolkit for our
Mhm.
supervisors, I think something that sort of goes in line with that is like, how do we help prepare them for those moments as they're still sort of making the transition from being part of the team to leading the team? And so, I mean,
Yeah.
I think the one golden nugget you kind of shared for folks is like you take off the security officer hat, and you put on the leadership hat, and it's a distinctive like line in the sand. Okay, now I'm on this side of the fence. But I think for folks like kind of shifting the dynamic of being one of the team members
Yeah.
to now I'm leading the team. Is there anything else you would add for folks kind of navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, training is really crucial for those people, and a lot of different kinds of training. I'm a huge fan, obviously, of training people's, mindset, and, getting them prepared to not be reactive. But at the same time, I'll just give you an example. I handed one of our supervisors a memo yesterday, and I said, this needs to go to this person, and instead of just saying, "Hey, can you deliver this?" And what would have happened if I would have said that is he would have given the memo and said, "Here's a memo for you. I don't know what it is, but here it is. They told me to bring it to you." I took a couple minutes to explain what the memo was, what it meant, what the processes were behind that. It's a newer supervisor. What the processes were behind it, what all these different things mean, what the person's options are. So hopefully that supervisor goes out now and understands a little more in depth, what this piece of paper means that they're handing to them, because it had some serious implications.
Yeah.
And so that kind of training, just, helping the supervisors just to understand the business, at
Yeah.
least certain parts of the business. They don't need to know how to how to do accounts receivable, but they do need to understand what that process looks like. So when a client says, whatever, has a billing question, they know where to refer them, what phone numbers
Yeah.
to give, and what hours they work, those kinds of things. So understanding how the business operates is incredibly important. They don't have to run the business. They just
Right.
have to understand how it operates on the inside, so they can get some context for the things that they're telling the guards.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I this question just came in and I think it's super relevant as we talk about context and kind of laying that foundation for the supervisors. Can you list like a few specific trainings that you find to be particularly valuable for field supervisors?
Yes. So I am a huge fan of a program called Crucial Conversations. There's a book, and there's a lot of training. The training is expensive, but you can get everything you need out of the book. And it's about a 7-step framework for having difficult conversations with
Hmm,
people, and you can practice that every day. You can practice that at home. You can practice that with your kids, and you can get more comfortable at having those difficult conversations with people. It doesn't even have to be hard conversations. It can be any conversation that you can do. So I
yeah.
love that. I love most kinds of mindfulness training. Of course, I love tactical brain training. because what it does is it takes mindfulness meditation out of the sort of like, it can stay there if you're a meditator and you want to stay in that spiritual part of it, you can do that. But really, there are so many scientifically proven benefits to mindfulness. This program really takes it down into that realm and talks about how our stress and trauma affect us and our brains and our thinking, and then gives us tools to be able to mitigate those things. Um,
Nicole,
so
I love that. She's
so
so
I
you
love
got
that too.
somebody holding up their book. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Sorry, Tony.
Oh, does somebody have it?
Yeah, somebody's holding it up.
I have
Oh,
Yeah,
a
awesome.
little
the
post-it note.
that is awesome, Nicole. Thank you for sharing that. That is
Oh
so
my gosh,
cool.
that's so cool. I didn't get to see it.
I lent the
Yeah.
other sister book to a colleague and never got it back. I had
Oh,
to,
you have crucial
Oh,
conversations. Oh, you
yeah,
have crucial confrontations.
yeah, and I had the
How,
oh,
crucial conversations. I never got it back.
oh.
and would you uh, I'm going to break the format. I'm going to break the fourth wall. But would you agree that that is a useful framework?
Absolutely, I
Yeah,
love this
yeah,
for both personal and professional.
yeah.
This is not a paid advertisement,
It
y'all.
is
No,
not.
it's not. It's how to have those conversations. Important. It may not even be confrontational. They're just important conversations that need to be had.
I love
Oh,
that. That
thanks so
is
much.
so cool. Sorry
Yeah, I
I
love that.
interrupted your train of thought, Tony, but I thought that was awesome.
No, that's that. Yeah, and then the Cal Saga supervisor training is also really good. It gives a good foundation and framework for people to understand security in California. So it's a really good framework. Um, I do love the trainings that we do, and the Security University. Um, it- those really help you understand the security business. So there's just
Yes.
any number of them out there that you can do. I would say in order though, first you have to master yourself before you start mastering any skills. So any kind of training that helps you to master your own reactions to stressful situations, and then any tools that help you to navigate those stressful situations, like crucial conversations or any others. There's a number of them out there, but that just happens to be my favorite.
I love that. And I think that's a really good pointed list. And all things that, we have folks in a variety of different roles on today. So we've got HR leaders, we've got owner operators, we've got boots on the ground security professionals who've been promoted up into operational management. And so I think there was something for each of you on there and on that list that Tony just sort of spit out. And that was a curveball question, by the way. Great job hitting that out of the park, Tony. That wasn't a planned question, but it popped up and I really think that's valuable. I will just share, especially to my fellow owner operators and executive level leaders in the industry. I bring all of my mid-level management to Security University, and I don't just send them to Security University personally. I attend and sit next to them. So I'm providing them like a play-by-play and context throughout the day of like what tidbits I really like. Oh yeah, this is why we do this, or did you catch that? Make sure you take note of that, and we really make it a really intentional time. And now that's not possible for everyone's schedule. I understand, but just like my little tidbit on that, I do think Security University, again, this is not a paid advertisement, but I really find great value, especially for those midline and especially for folks that came up through the ranks. We promote a lot of people up because I love mentoring and developing people. And so we get a lot of folks that didn't come to us with that wealth of knowledge or on the industry or leadership or certainly not leadership in the industry. So, on that note, Tony, my next question for you, this is an exciting one. I want to give those frontline supervisors on today something they can walk away with. So, are there any practical tools you can give frontline supervisors on how to regulate their own emotions in high stress situations so that we're not the ones escalating problems? Like, is there one or two? I
Yeah.
know you've got a whole toolkit worth, but like one or two that you could give us that they could walk away with today.
I do. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge to them. I mean, I was a supervisor for 13 years, and I want to acknowledge, and I was doing an orientation a couple years ago, maybe I can't remember, but we had a former supervisor in from another company, and I don't remember which company it was. But as soon as I spotted him as a former supervisor, I immediately said, "Oh, you were a former supervisor. Do you want to be? You should think about being a supervisor for us." And he said, "Nope, no, thank you." And I asked him why, and he said because he was burnt out. He was burnt out from the stress of having to deal with the conflict and confrontation with guards every day. So I want to just acknowledge that's a real thing. That if you're going around all day, every day, and just talking to people about the things that they're doing wrong. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you'll have days like that. It takes a toll. I mean, you can only hear so many times, it takes a toll. But not only that, the stress of because sometimes you're the only person that supervisor has seen all excuse me, you're the only person that that guard has seen all day, and they just need to tell somebody about the thing that happened to them at home with a loved one or the stress that they're having or whatever about the bills they're having a hard time paying, and you're there and you're going to hear it, and you may do that 10 times that day. And that takes a toll, and it's really 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 stressful. So um, taking care of oneself is so incredibly important. Honestly, and this is gonna sound cheesy, but that starts with, you know, uh, getting a good night's sleep, eating right, drinking lots of water, and then whatever uh, practice that you do to de-stress yourself and decompress yourself, because you are now carrying all of those things with you around to the other sites. Um, there's a couple of techniques and tools that you can use. I would highly recommend just any kind of just deep breathing, just a couple of deep breaths before you go into any site, just to lower your blood pressure, lower your heart rate, get some oxygen into your brain. And then asking yourself, and there's a lot of different techniques, and it would take me a while to find the right one. There's a couple of them. There's just listening. There's square breathing. There's lots of other stuff that you can do. But after you take those deep breaths, after you settle yourself, ask yourself what you want to accomplish when you go in there, and go in there with an idea of what you want to accomplish, and be prepared for that to get derailed. Um, so, um, but there are a lot there are a lot of great techniques. Maybe in a future coffee chat we can just talk about some of those physical things that people can do. It would take a little bit for us to really get
Yeah.
into it. Yeah,
Well, and I think
yeah,
that's a great, like, that's certainly a great starter list. I will share with you all my late director of security operations from Guardian Protection Force, which I maybe should have clarified, by the way. Guardian
yeah.
Security Agency, Guardian Protection Force. We are not related entities. We just share the lovely Guardian name. So, just for anybody that maybe was wondering about that, just a full disclaimer: we are both based in Northern California, and we do share Guardian as part of our brand, but completely separate entities, not no relation. But my late director of operations, who passed away in 2020, he did Tai Chi daily, and he
Mm.
just swore by Tai Chi. He was a wonderful retired Navy leader, and just a phenomenal human. And so it's funny, I sort of like teased him about it for years, and now I regret that. And I've actually tried I don't do it daily, but I have tried Tai Chi, and it's actually really awesome. So whatever it is, like Tony mentioned, there's so many different options for you. But just to acknowledge, like, I know in this industry, right, there's definitely some great macho energy, which I love. I love that about our industry. But I do think for even my big macho guys on the call, there's science behind what's happening in our brains when we are under, and certainly when we're under chronic stress. And so, actually, like improving oxygen flow to your brain. I know it sounds a little wooey to think like, oh, focus on my breathing, but there's actual science behind what that does inside your brain. And so, yeah, to Tony's point, we could have a whole security university around the science
Yeah.
behind it. Right, we don't have time to get into that today, so I'm going to ask you for a little bit of trust. And if you don't trust me, I mean, Google can be your friend on this one. But fair warning, you might go down a little bit of a rabbit hole because there's a lot of science behind all of these different things that Tony's talking about. And I promise you, he's not. Tony is not a wooey guy. If you can kind of
Mm-mm.
pick that up from him, I've known
I do
Tony
this
long
for
enough. I can,
performance. I do this
yeah,
because I want to perform at a high level, not for any other reason. And you'll see. I know we don't want to belabor this, but you watched any of the elite athletes that are out there, and they're doing a lot of positive self talk. They're doing a lot of breathing. They're doing just a lot of things that we used to think were kind of goofy. But
yeah.
if LeBron's doing it before he goes out on the court, then I'm doing it
I mean,
because
whoop,
maybe I'll
there
get
it
a
is.
sneaker deal out of it.
You never know, Tony. And
Yeah.
thank you, Kate, for dropping those the coffee chat on mental health from last February in the chat. So if anybody wants to go and listen to that another day, or later today, if you're really excited about it, and we talk about some of those things. So without further ado, though, we have about 10 minutes left, and I would love to get to two more questions. So I'm gonna see if I can power us through. But one of the questions that I think is really relevant to everyone on this call, and it's a hard question, Tony, but in your opinion, what is the right way to hold officers accountable without damaging trust or morale? And I
Yeah.
think that's that delicate balance. And I'm kind of, pivoting a little bit from our last question, but I want to get to that because I think it's so important. You mentioned obviously like if my officers are only seeing me when I'm disciplining them for doing something wrong, we know that's definitely like I think not helpful. But is there anything, in addition to kind of consciously balancing um praise with critical feedback, is there anything else that we need to be mindful of as we're holding our officers accountable with the goal of not damaging that trust or morale?
Yeah. You know who's really good at this is Heather. Heather is really good at this. And more people walk out of her. I mean, nobody's there are people who are going into her office for good stuff. But there are people also going in there for stuff, once they're in there, once they're in her office, we've already tried a lot of things,
Yeah.
right? And she is really good at walking people out of that office and having them say thank you and how much she appreciates. So I wonder, just to put her on the spot, if she has any insight on that, if she wants to talk about that. But she is really, really good at that process. Oh, there she is.
I actually, it comes back to a question Tony asked me one time. How many times do people walk out of your office still angry or still having some type of feelings of, being upset? And I said never, because I don't stop the conversation until we're all on the same page, and that people feel that I'm listening and hearing what they're having to say. you know like he said, by the time people get to my office, it's usually a discipline matter or something like that. um but I want them to know that they're valuable, and that we just have to discuss, what is the problem. Our company is known for giving a million chances. We don't fire, right away. If we have people who, we listen, and they're humans, and there's life going on, and we understand that. So I just keep the conversation going until everyone's happy and on the same page. And I think that's the biggest thing is giving them their due time and not trying to just, okay, here's your write up, this is what's going on, um and move on, and just actually listening to people, and that crucial conversations. Tony had me go through all that, and it is very, very beneficial. I highly recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, I love that. And I know it's hard. Maybe like not I don't imagine like everyone has always left my office happy, but at a place of understanding. So
Yeah.
even when right, yeah, like they're maybe not thrilled with my decision, like they certainly understand my perspective and they felt heard. Like I've made it the I love that. We don't stop the conversation until everyone in the room has had the opportunity to kind of share their perspective, and even if, we're not always gonna agree, but that's okay too. So I think that's huge. I love that perspective, Heather. Thank you for chiming in on that.
I've seen people be terminated and walk out of Heather's office apologizing to her for making her do that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
you had to do this,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and
I love
and
that.
that's huge. And if you go to some of this training, the first thing they're going to tell you is you have to make sure that they understand first that you care about them. If you're there's a lot of nuance to this, but you're here because I care about you and because you're valuable, and then work your way from there, because if they don't feel valued and respected
Yep.
and feel like they're important, then the conversation is over before it even begins. So
And just a side note to that, y'all, people who feel heard and respected don't tip often go hire attorneys, right? And so for my HR, and ownership, listening in, like I think that is probably the single most critical component in your business. And the reality is, as you grow, owners, directors of HR, right? Like you're not the ones having those interactions with your people. It's your field supervisors. So to all my field supervisors, here, that is so important, right? Like I know you're in the thick of it day to day. You're dealing with the call outs, you're dealing with the pissed off clients, you're getting dumped on from the security officers who are having a bad day. And so it's really easy to be short with people and be dismissive of your team. And I think that, as an owner operator, my number one job, in fact, really my only job, is to support the team underneath me so that then they can go out and support the team underneath them. And right, if all of us are focused on the people that report to us, then in theory, when your product is people, right, then you're going to have a great product. And so I just think that's a really critical point. And I'm so glad, Tony, that you kind of underscored that. And thank you, Heather, for sharing that. We're down to our last 4 minutes. So I'm seeing some additional like great comments and questions coming in the chat. I don't know if we're gonna have time to get to all of them. Well, we're not gonna have time to get to all of them, but I'm gonna see what we can get us through. So I think this question is my most favorite question. It's why I saved it for last on my end is what separates supervisors who burn out under pressure from those who grow stronger because of it?
um I think it's a combination of what's in them and what's around them. So you put it brilliantly, I think, Ashley, which is that they have to feel just like that person that's sitting in front of them, who's getting that write up, or it's just like they have to feel that support. Your supervisors have to feel that support from the managers. The managers have to
Yeah,
understand that this is a hard job. Supervising frontline security guards is a hard job.
yeah.
I mean, it's not breaking rocks with a pickaxe, but it is emotionally taxing some
Yeah,
days to just
yeah,
be saying the same things over and over again and hearing people's problems. So that's one of the first things, is that they have good support and mentorship from their management. The second thing is that they are intellectually curious. They're always thinking about how to improve themselves and wanting resources and consistently getting feedback.
yeah,
If you're doing performance evaluations and the first time they hear about a deficiency they have is in that a performance evaluation, you haven't done it right.
yeah,
You haven't done it right. They should not be surprised by anything in those evaluations because they should already know that. That constant communication and feedback to them is super important. And I know I'm just kind of speaking in like really absolute terms right now, and there's a lot of nuance to this too. And I want
Sure.
to underscore that there are times when you just have to come in and say, "Look, we're done. I can't. There's no hand holding here. We're just done. Your behavior has to stop, or you're gone, or you are gone because your behavior didn't stop." Um, so that intellectual curiosity is huge. I want my supervisors to be so good that we're in danger of losing them. I want them to encounter somebody in the field who owns a security company and go, "Hey, how do I hire you away from that company because you're that good?" And newsflash, they're not going to leave because you've treated them so well. They're not going to leave for that little bit of money. I mean, some people might, but for the most part, they're going to stay because of what you've given them. To your and the last thing to your point, Ashley, in the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about um, the kind of doctors who get the most malpractice suits, and it's the doctors whose patients say they don't like their doctor. They are the ones that get the malpractice suits. The ones who don't are the ones that are well regarded by their patients, even when they make more serious mistakes than the ones that they don't like. So it is absolutely true, and it is borne out in research that the better relationship you have with your people, the less likely you are to encounter those lawsuits.
Yeah, and again, it's you're friendly, you're not friends. It doesn't mean you're your best friends and you let employees walk all over you. I think it's a very delicate fine line. I think just making sure that your team feels heard, right? And I know I've got one of my ambassador committee members who does just a phenomenal job of this, Margarita Coleman, who I believe is on with us today with Intercept Security. She is like constantly praising and recognizing her team and holding them accountable, right? So like
Mhm.
she really makes it a habit of pouring into supervisors and then encouraging her supervisors to pour into their teams in small little ways. Like I mean, Anne Lagusa with the Works Consulting does a really great job of like saying, it's not about throwing your team pizza parties every week, right? Like
Right.
it's not that. There's this fine line with ensuring that people feel seen and heard when they do things well, and they're going to be more receptive to hearing your feedback when they didn't do something so well. And then you can kind of navigate that together. And I really love that. I really wanted to fit in a couple more questions, but the time is now up. So I want to just thank you, Tony. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, everyone who, dropped in the chat. This is like one of the most lively chats we've had, which tells me that there's a lot to this topic, and maybe we can put together a part two. This is really well attended. And I want to encourage you, let's keep this conversation going. I know sometimes you all hear like networking, and you get a little bit, I don't know if I want to do that. I promise you, this conversation is exactly the type of conversation that we have when we break out. We kind of teleport you into these smaller Zoom rooms. So you're in smaller groups and you can get to know other operators and leaders just like yourselves. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kate and let her wrap us up. But I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your insight, Tony. It's always a pleasure to bring you on and pick your brain about all of these awesome things that you have just a wealth of knowledge on. So thank you for that. I
Thanks
hope
for
to
having me.
see all of you in our breakout sessions here in just a moment. Kate, back to you.